A bombshell report is rocking the little people, big world community tonight, exposing a secret land deal so audacious, so deeply personal, it threatens to tear the Roloff family apart for good. We are talking about an alleged scheme of stunning betrayal, a secret backroom deal that could only be described as the ultimate act of deception. Sources close to the family are detailing a shocking story of forgery, fraud, and a secret $300,000 cash grab, with Caryn Chandler at the very center of the storm. The target? Amy Roloff and the very piece of land she bought to secure her future and her peace. Before the ink was even dry on Amy's purchase of her new property, insiders claim Caryn secretly sold access right across Amy's front lawn to a powerful developer for a massive payout, forging Amy's name and pocketing every last cent. This is a story you will not hear anywhere else. If you believe that the truth, no matter how shocking, needs to be brought into the light, then I need you to do 3 things for me right now. Hit that like button, subscribe to LPBW Update, and ring the notification bell. We are diving deep into the reports and exclusive theories that network television is too afraid to touch, and you will not want to miss a single update as this explosive story unfolds. Now, let's break down this incredible situation. To truly understand the gravity of what our sources are alleging, we have to go back to the beginning of the end for Amy Roloff on the farm. For decades, that farm was her world. It was more than just land. It was her home, the place she raised her 4 children, the business she helped build from the ground up with her own 2 hands. The emotional weight of every acre was immeasurable. When the divorce from Matt happened, the division of that property became one of the most painful and prolonged sagas in the show's history. Fans watched as Amy wrestled with the decision, the emotional turmoil of letting go of the north side of the farm, the home she had known for 30 years. In the end, she made the difficult choice to sell her half of the family farm to Matt. It was a decision fraught with tension and heartbreak. We saw the arguments, the lowball offers, the feeling Amy had of being pushed out of her own legacy. Matt, with Caryn by his side, eventually took control, but Amy, in a move of incredible strength and forward thinking, didn't just walk away. She purchased her own property, a beautiful new home just a short drive away. This wasn't just a house, it was a statement. It was Amy planting her own flag, building her own future with her new husband, Chris Marek. It was her sanctuary, a place free from the drama, the history, and the ever-present influence of Matt and Caryn. It was supposed to be her happily ever after, her clean break. But according to the information we are now receiving, that peace was a complete illusion. While Amy was busy celebrating her new life, her new beginning, a plan was allegedly being put into motion behind her back, a plan born of greed and opportunity. And the architect of this plan, the reports claim, was none other than Caryn Chandler. Caryn, the former farm manager, the woman who went from employee to Matt Roloff's partner, was in a unique position of power and knowledge during the complex transition of the farm properties. She was involved in the paperwork, the logistics, the final division of the land parcels. She knew the surveyors, the county clerks, the developers in the area. She had, as they say, the keys to the kingdom. This is where the story takes a dark and disturbing turn. As the final paperwork for the farm division was being processed, a major developer, let's call them West Ridge Luxury Estates for the sake of this report, was in a serious bind. They were in the process of building a multi-million-dollar subdivision of luxury homes on a plot of land that bordered the newly reconfigured Roloff property. Specifically, the corner of the land that Amy was set to officially own in a matter of days. Their project was massive, and they had hit a major logistical snag. They needed to run a high-capacity sewer main and a primary power conduit from the main road to their new development. And the most direct, cost-effective, and time-saving route was a straight line directly across the front corner of what was about to be Amy Roloff's front yard. Going around the property would have meant months of delays, negotiations with other landowners, and hundreds of thousands of dollars in extra costs. This developer was under pressure from their investors and facing deadlines. They needed a solution, and they needed it fast. So they approached the Roloff camp with a very generous offer. They were prepared to pay a one-time fee of $300,000 for a permanent utility easement. An easement is a legal right to use another person's land for a specific purpose. In this case, it meant the developer would have the permanent right to have their sewer and power lines buried under Amy's land and the right to access that land for any future maintenance or repairs. It would be a permanent scar on her new property, a permanent claim by an outside entity on the land that was supposed to be her sanctuary. Now, under normal circumstances, this offer would have been presented to the new landowner, Amy. She would have the right to consider it, to negotiate it, or, most likely, to flatly refuse it. Who in their right mind would want a construction crew digging a massive trench across their brand new lawn for any amount of money, let alone a permanent easement that could affect the property's value and her peace and quiet forever? But these were not normal circumstances. The person the developer's lawyers made contact with, the person handling the final administrative details of the farm's division, was allegedly Caryn Chandler. And in that moment, seeing that $300,000 offer, Caryn saw an opportunity. Not for the family, not for Matt, but for herself. According to our insider reports, this is where the scheme was born. Caryn allegedly understood the timeline perfectly. The ownership of that specific parcel was in a liminal state, a gray area, for just a few more days before it was officially and irrevocably in Amy's name. The developer was in a hurry. Amy was busy moving and setting up her new life, completely unaware of this back-channel communication. It was the perfect storm of opportunity, timing, and access. The theory our sources are putting forward is that Caryn made a calculated decision. She knew Amy would never agree to this. She knew that even bringing it up to Amy would result in a hard no and the end of the potential payday. She also knew that trying to get Matt to agree to something so openly deceitful against his ex-wife would be a complicated, messy affair, one that he might not even go for. So she allegedly decided to cut everyone out of the loop. Amy, Matt, the kids, everyone. This was going to be her secret. The next steps in this alleged scheme are a masterclass in deception. Caryn reportedly told the developer's representatives that she was acting as Amy's agent in this matter, a trusted proxy handling the final details of the property transfer. To a third party who only knows the Roloffs from television and public records, this might have seemed plausible. Caryn had been the farm manager for years. Her deep involvement was a matter of public knowledge. She allegedly told them that Amy had already been briefed on the offer and had pre-approved the deal. She sold them a story of convenience of a new homeowner who was too busy with her move to handle the tedious paperwork herself. "Amy is just thrilled you're making this so easy," she might have said, a warm and reassuring smile on her face. "She asked me to handle the signing to speed things up for everyone. She's eager to be a good neighbor to your new development." It was a lie, built on a foundation of half-truths about her role in the family's business. To seal the deal, the developer needed a signed and notarized easement agreement. This was the point of no return. This is where, according to the allegations, simple deception turned into serious criminal activity. Caryn is accused of taking the legal document, the permanent utility easement agreement, and forging Amy Roloff's signature. Think about the audacity, the sheer nerve it would take to do that. to sit down with a pen and replicate the signature of the woman whose family and life she had become so enmeshed in. It's a level of betrayal that is hard to comprehend. With the forged signature in place, the document was allegedly notarized and filed with the county. To the outside world, it was a legitimate, legally binding contract. The developer, believing they were acting in good faith, had their easement. They were cleared to start digging. But the most critical part of the scheme was the money. How do you get a $300,000 wire transfer without anyone, especially Matt Roloff, noticing? A check made out to the Roloff family farm would have raised immediate red flags. A wire to a joint account would have been impossible to hide. Caryn, ever the planner, allegedly had a solution for this as well. The reports claim she had previously set up a private limited liability company, an LLC, under a generic-sounding business name, something like Pacific Northwest Land Management or C&M Solutions, something that would sound official but be completely anonymous. This LLC had its own bank account, an account that only she controlled. She instructed the developer's accounting department to wire the $300,000 payment directly to this shell company, telling them it was a specific account set up to handle the farm's real estate transactions to keep the books clean. The developer, having no reason to question this, complied. The transfer was made. $300,000, a life-changing amount of money, vanished from the developer's account and reappeared in Caryn's private, secret account, completely off the Roloff family books. It was, in theory, the perfect crime. Amy would be living in her new house, and by the time she even noticed the construction, it would be too late. The easement would be legally filed, the work would be underway, and who would she blame? The developer. She would assume it was a legal deal she was somehow unaware of, a mistake made during the closing, a detail buried in the fine print. She would be angry, for sure, but her anger would be directed at the lawyers and the real estate agents. The money would be long gone, and Caryn would be $300,000 richer, with no one the wiser. She had, in her mind, gotten away with it. For 2 weeks, it seemed she had. Amy moved into her new home, overjoyed to be starting this new chapter. She was decorating, unpacking, making the house a home with Chris. She woke up every morning to the peace and quiet of her own property, the sanctuary she had fought so hard for. She had no idea that a legal document with her forged signature was already filed at the county courthouse. She had no idea that a secret deal had been made, selling away a piece of her land's integrity. She had no idea that a construction crew was mobilizing, preparing to tear into her front yard. And then, one Tuesday morning, that peace was shattered. The day started like any other, but it was soon interrupted by a low, guttural rumble. At first, she might have ignored it, thinking it was distant traffic or a neighbor's project, but the sound grew louder, closer. It was the unmistakable sound of heavy machinery, the beeping of a vehicle in reverse, the clang of metal on metal. It was coming from her own property. Confused and alarmed, Amy went to her front window and looked out. What she saw must have felt like a nightmare. There, on her pristine green front lawn, were 2 massive yellow excavators. A team of construction workers in hard hats were marking out a wide path across her yard with stakes and spray paint. A huge trenching machine was being unloaded from a flatbed truck. Her heart pounding, a mix of confusion and anger rising in her chest, Amy ran outside. She confronted the first person she saw, a man in a vest holding a set of blueprints, the site foreman. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice shaking with adrenaline. "This is my property. You can't be here. Who are you?" The foreman, a man just trying to do his job, looked at her with genuine confusion. He wasn't expecting a confrontation. In his world, all the legalities were handled long before his crew ever showed up. He had a work order in a legally filed easement. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to disturb you," he said, trying to be calm. "We're from West Ridge. We're here to install the utility line for the new development. We have a legal easement to work in this designated area." Amy was incredulous. "An easement? What are you talking about? I never agreed to any easement. I own this land. I never signed anything. You are trespassing. I want you and your machines off my property right now." The situation was escalating. The construction crew stopped what they were doing, watching the confrontation unfold. The foreman, realizing this woman was not just confused, but genuinely believed she had been wronged, tried to de-escalate. He wanted to prove he was acting in good faith. He went back to his truck and pulled out a folder. He walked back to Amy, his face a mixture of apology and frustration. "Ma'am, look, I don't want any trouble," he said, handing her a document. "This is a copy of the permanent utility easement filed with the county 2 weeks ago. As you can see, it's all signed and approved." Amy snatched the paper from his hand, her eyes scanning the legal jargon until she reached the last page. And that's when her blood ran cold. There it was at the bottom of the page on the signature line next to her printed name, her signature, or at least what was supposed to be her signature. It was a forgery, and a convincing one at that. To a stranger, it would look perfectly legitimate, but to Amy, it was a grotesque alien imitation of her own name. It was a violation. Someone had stolen her identity, signed her name, and sold away a piece of her land without her knowledge or consent. In that single horrifying moment, Amy knew. She knew she had been betrayed. The foreman saw the color drain from her face, the look of pure shock and violation in her eyes. He saw her hand tremble as she held the document. He realized this was not a simple misunderstanding. This was something much, much bigger. He was just a pawn in a much larger game, and his crew had just become the red flag that would unravel the entire conspiracy. Amy stood there on her lawn, surrounded by the machinery meant to destroy it, holding the proof of a stunning deception in her hands. The initial shock began to morph into a cold, hard anger. Someone had done this to her. Someone had targeted her, specifically. And while she didn't know how or why just yet, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was not going to let them get away with it. Her dream of a peaceful sanctuary had been turned into a potential crime scene, and the fight for her property and her name was just beginning. The foreman, now deeply concerned, tried to speak. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" But Amy barely heard him. Her mind was racing, connecting dots that she didn't even know existed moments before. Who had the access? Who knew the details of the land transfer? Who would benefit from such a deal? Who would have the audacity to forge her name and sell her out? The list of people with that level of intimate knowledge was terrifyingly short. A deep-seated suspicion, a fear she had probably harbored for years, began to crystallize in her mind. This felt personal. This felt like an attack, not just on her property, but on her very identity, her right to a life, separate from the farm, separate from her past. She looked up from the forged document, her eyes scanning the faces of the construction workers, the foremen, the indifferent machines poised to dig. They weren't the enemy. They were just the messengers, the unwitting revealers of a deep and personal wound. Her real enemy was somewhere else, counting the money they had stolen from her. The anger that had been simmering now boiled over into a steely resolve. This was not the old Amy, the one who would back down or get bogged down in emotional turmoil. This was Amy who had fought for her independence, who had started a new life, who had found a partner in Chris, who supported her unconditionally. This was Amy who knew how to fight back. Without another word to the foreman, she turned and marched back into her house, the fraudulent document clutched in her hand. Her mind was a whirlwind of betrayal. The very idea that someone she knew, someone in her immediate orbit, could orchestrate such a calculated and malicious act was sickening. This wasn't a random business deal gone wrong. This was a targeted strike. It was designed to be secret, to be discovered only after it was too late, when the trench was already dug and the pipes were in the ground, making it a permanent fixture she would be forced to live with. The perpetrator had not only stolen $300,000, they had tried to steal her peace of mind, to taint her sanctuary with their greed. She immediately called her husband Chris, his voice a calming presence in the storm of her emotions. She explained the situation, the excavators, the foreman, the document with the forged signature. Chris, ever the practical and protective partner, was furious on her behalf. His reaction would have been one of immediate action. Call the lawyer now, would have been his advice. And that's exactly what Amy did. She didn't call Matt. She didn't call Caryn. She didn't post on social media or cause a public scene. She made the single smartest move she could have made. She called her real estate lawyer, the same one who had handled the purchase of her new home. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a legal crisis involving fraud and forgery. On the phone with her lawyer, the story tumbled out. Amy, holding nothing back, detailed the entire morning's events. The lawyer listened intently, the gravity of the situation becoming clearer with every word. A forged signature on a legally filed easement is a major felony. The financial implications, the property rights violations, the clear evidence of fraud, it was a legal powder keg. The lawyer's advice was immediate and clear. Do not engage with the construction crew. Do not speak with the developer directly. Let my office handle everything. We need to act fast. The first official act from Amy's legal team was a cease and desist letter, dispatched immediately to the headquarters of West Ridge Luxury Estates. It was a legal broadside, informing them that the easement they believed they had purchased was fraudulent, that their presence on Amy Roloff's property was considered trespassing, and that any further work was to be stopped immediately pending a full investigation. For the developer, this letter would have been a 5-alarm fire. Their entire project timeline, their multi-million-dollar investment, was now in jeopardy. They weren't just facing delays, they were now unwittingly entangled in a serious fraud case. Their company's name could be dragged through the mud. Simultaneously, Amy's lawyer began the process of filing an emergency injunction with the court to legally bar any construction on the property. The wheels of justice were beginning to turn, powered by Amy's refusal to be a victim. But the most critical piece of the puzzle was understanding how this happened. The lawyer needed to know who the developer had dealt with, who had presented themselves as Amy's agent, who signed the papers, who received the money. This was the information that would lead them directly to the source of the fraud. The developer, now in full-blown crisis mode, was more than willing to cooperate. The last thing their company needed was a high-profile fraud lawsuit, especially one involving a public figure like Amy Roloff. A scandal like that could be devastating to their reputation and their bottom line. Their lawyers immediately contacted Amy's lawyer. They wanted to make it clear that they believed they had acted in good faith. They were, in their view, victims in this scheme as well, duped by a sophisticated liar. To prove their innocence and to mitigate their own legal and financial exposure, they made a strategic decision. They would give Amy's legal team everything they had, their entire file on the easement transaction. This was the moment the tide truly turned. This was the beginning of the end for the scheme. The developer's file was a treasure trove of evidence, a complete self-contained narrative of the entire fraud from beginning to end. It contained every email, every phone log, every document related to the deal. And as Amy's lawyer began to sift through the digital and paper trail, a sickeningly clear picture emerged. The email chain was the smoking gun. It started with an initial inquiry from the developer to a General Roloff Farms email address, an inquiry that was, according to the records, intercepted and answered by Caryn Chandler. From that moment on, she controlled the entire communication. The emails showed Caryn presenting herself as the sole point of contact for the transaction. They showed her confidently negotiating the terms, her language full of business jargon and a feigned air of authority. She used phrases like, "I've discussed this with the owner and we are prepared to move forward," and "to streamline this process, Amy has authorized me to handle the closing." She was, in black and white, impersonating Amy's official representative. As the lawyer read through the emails, they could see the web of lies being spun in real time. They saw the email where Caryn instructed the developer to wire the funds to her private LLC, complete with the account and routing numbers. She had even attached the LLC's formation documents to give it an air of legitimacy. And then there it was, the scanned copy of the final easement agreement, the very same one the foreman had shown Amy, with the forged signature clearly visible, attached to an email from Caryn with a message that read, "Here is the signed document as promised. We are all set." But the file contained even more. It included the bank records from the developer's side, showing the wire transfer of exactly $300,000, leaving their account on a specific date and time. And the recipient account was not in the name of Amy Roloff or Roloff Farms. It was in the name of the shell company, the one our sources claim was secretly controlled by Caryn. The money trail was undeniable. It was a direct line from the developer's bank to Caryn's secret account. With this evidence in hand, Amy's case went from strong to absolutely airtight. It was a prosecutor's dream. They had a clear victim in Amy Roloff. They had a cooperating witness in the horrified developer. They had a documented paper trail of impersonation and deception. They had a forged legal document. And they had a clear, undeniable money trail leading to one person and one person only, Caryn Chandler. There was no ambiguity, no room for doubt, no way for her to deny her involvement. The digital breadcrumbs she had left behind had formed a path directly to her doorstep. The perfect crime had turned out to be perfectly documented. Armed with this mountain of irrefutable proof, Amy's lawyer prepared the next and most devastating step. It was time to move beyond cease and desist letters and injunctions. It was time for a direct confrontation. It was time for the reckoning. A lawsuit was drafted, a powerful legal document that laid out the entire fraudulent scheme in excruciating detail. The charges were severe: fraud, forgery, unjust enrichment, and a request for significant punitive damages on top of the initial stolen amount. Every piece of evidence provided by the developer was attached as an exhibit: the emails, the bank records, the forged easement itself. An affidavit from the developer's CEO swearing to the facts of their interactions with Caryn was also included. The plan was not to quietly negotiate a settlement. The plan was to serve this lawsuit directly to Matt and Caryn at Roloff Farms. It was a declaration of war. It was Amy, through her legal team, stating unequivocally that she knew what Caryn had done, and she was coming to collect. The moment that process server walked onto Roloff Farms and handed that thick legal envelope to Matt and Caryn would be a moment of pure, unadulterated drama, the kind that no reality TV camera could ever hope to capture. It was the moment the secret was finally out, the moment the lies came crashing down. The quiet, peaceful life Caryn had built with Matt, funded by her secret deception, was about to be blown apart. Amy was no longer just fighting for her land. She was fighting for justice, and she had all the ammunition she needed to win. Imagine the scene: a quiet afternoon at Roloff Farms. The sun is shining, the familiar backdrop of the pumpkin patch and the big red barns, creating a picturesque, almost tranquil setting. Matt and Caryn are likely on the porch of the new house, the dream home Matt finally built, perhaps discussing plans for the upcoming pumpkin season or their next vacation. It's a scene of domestic bliss. the culmination of years of planning and partnership. And then a nondescript sedan pulls up the long driveway. A man gets out holding a large, thick envelope. He's a process server. He asks for Matthew Roloff and Caryn Chandler by name. This is the moment of impact, the legal bombshell landing squarely in the middle of their carefully constructed world. Matt, ever the businessman, would probably take the envelope with a certain curiosity, assuming it was a routine business matter, a dispute with a vendor, or a county permit issue. Caryn, however, would have known exactly what it was. Insiders allege that the moment she saw the official-looking envelope, the color drained from her face. It was the one possibility she had likely tried to push to the very back of her mind, the nightmare scenario she had convinced herself would never happen. Amy was supposed to be angry at the developer, not at her. Amy was supposed to be confused, not armed with a legal team. As Matt opened the package, his initial curiosity would have quickly turned to stone-cold confusion. The first page would have been the summons, with the names clearly listed. Amy Roloff, plaintiff, versus Caryn Chandler and Matthew Roloff, defendants. The inclusion of his own name would have been the first shock. Why was he being sued by his ex-wife? But as he read further, as he leafed through the pages detailing the complaint, the confusion would have morphed into utter disbelief and then a dawning horror. The lawsuit laid out the entire story we've just discussed, but in dry, brutal, legal language. It spoke of a fraudulent easement, of a forged signature, of a secret wire transfer for $300,000. And then Matt would have reached the exhibits, the evidence. This is where the world would have stopped turning for him. He would have seen the printouts of the email chain with Caryn's name, her words, impersonating Amy's agent. He would have seen the instructions to wire the money, not to a farm account, not to a joint account, but to a LLC he had never heard of. He would have seen the bank records, the undeniable proof of the transfer, and he would have seen the easement itself with the clumsy, forged imitation of his ex-wife's signature, a document that Caryn had single-handedly created and pushed through. Our sources can only speculate on the conversation that followed, but they say it was nothing short of explosive. This was the moment the mask finally slipped. Matt, holding the lawsuit in his trembling hands, would have turned to Caryn, his face a mask of cold fury. "What is this?" he would have demanded, his voice dangerously low. "What in the hell is this, Caryn?" And what could she say? The evidence was right there in his hands. The lies were exposed in black and white. According to reports, she tried to deny it at first, a panicked, desperate attempt to deflect. "It's a misunderstanding," she might have stammered. "Amy is just angry. She's trying to cause trouble." But Matt wouldn't have been listening to her words. He would have been staring at the evidence. Matt Roloff is a man who prides himself on being in control, on knowing every detail of his business, every dollar that comes in and goes out. The realization that Caryn had conducted a massive secret transaction behind his back, using his farm's name and reputation as cover, would have been a betrayal of the highest order. This wasn't just about Amy anymore. This was about him. She had lied to him. She had hidden a $300,000 secret from him. She had established a secret company, a secret bank account. She had been operating a shadow business right under his nose. "Did you do this?" he would have asked again, his voice cutting through her excuses. "Did you forge Amy's signature? Did you take this money?" And in the face of the undeniable proof, the denials would have crumbled, replaced by a desperate, tearful confession. The excuses would have poured out. Maybe she claimed she did it for them, for their future, to have a nest egg that was just theirs. Maybe she tried to justify it by saying Amy didn't deserve the property anyway, or that the developer was going to get their way one way or another. But none of it would have mattered. The trust that had been the foundation of their relationship was irrevocably shattered in that moment. Matt was now faced with a horrifying reality. The woman he loved, the woman he had planned to spend the rest of his life with, was capable of a level of deception he could have never imagined. And worse, she had dragged him into it, naming him as a defendant in a massive fraud lawsuit. His name, his reputation, his legacy, all were now on the line because of her secret greed. The first call they made was, of course, to their lawyer. The scene would have been tense, Matt and Caryn sitting in the lawyer's office, the lawsuit spread out on the conference table between them. Their lawyer, a seasoned professional, would have read through the documents with a growing sense of dread. He would have looked at the exhibits, the emails, the bank records. And then he would have looked up at Caryn, his face grim, and delivered the bad news. There was no defense. The evidence was overwhelming, a slam dunk for Amy's side. There was no way to fight this in court. A trial would be a public relations disaster, and one they would almost certainly lose. A judge and jury would see a clear case of a greedy individual forging documents to steal money. Furthermore, the lawyer would have explained, this was far more serious than just a civil lawsuit. Forgery of a legal document like a property easement is a felony. Wire fraud is a federal crime. If Amy decided to press the issue, if she took this evidence to the district attorney, Caryn could be facing a criminal investigation. She could be looking at indictment, a trial, and even prison time. The word prison hanging in the air of that sterile law office would have been the final nail in the coffin of Caryn's scheme. The $300,000 secret she thought would secure her future was now threatening to take away her freedom. The lawyer's advice would have been blunt and unequivocal: settle now. Give Amy whatever she wants. Do not let this go to court. Do not let this get to the press. Do not give her lawyers the chance to depose Caryn under oath, where she would either have to admit to the felonies or commit perjury, another felony. Their only move was a full and complete surrender. And just like that, the power dynamic shifted entirely. Amy Roloff, the woman who had been pushed, prodded, and pressured for years, was now in a position of absolute power. She held all the cards. Her lawyer received the call from Matt and Caryn's legal team, a call that was likely drenched in capitulation. They wanted to know what it would take to make this go away. And Amy, guided by her lawyer and supported by Chris, laid out her terms. They were simple, direct, and non-negotiable. First, the fraudulent easement was to be immediately and permanently voided and expunged from the county records. The developer, eager to distance themselves from the scandal, readily agreed to sign any and all paperwork to make this happen. Amy's property would be made whole again, as if the fraudulent transaction had never occurred. The threat of excavators and trenches was gone forever. Second, all of Amy's legal fees, every single dollar she had spent hiring her lawyer to uncover the truth and fight back, were to be paid in full by Caryn. Amy was not going to beat out a single penny for the trouble she had been forced to endure. Third, and this was the masterstroke, the ultimate justice, the $300,000. Amy did not want the money returned to the developer. She did not want it put into an escrow account. She wanted the full $300,000, the entire proceeds of the fraudulent deal, wired directly to her as damages for the fraud, the emotional distress, and the violation she had suffered. For Caryn, this must have been the most humiliating moment of her life. The money she had stolen, the secret nest egg she had so carefully hidden away, now had to be handed over in its entirety to the very person she had wronged. She had to log into the secret bank account for her Shell LLC, the symbol of her grand deception, and authorize a wire transfer for the full amount, plus legal fees, sending her ill-gotten gains directly into Amy Roloff's bank account. The scheme had netted her nothing but humiliation and legal trouble. She had been caught, exposed, and was now forced to personally fund the victory of her victim. The consequences of this reckoning would ripple out, touching every corner of the Roloff family. For Amy, it was a total victory. Not only did she successfully protect her new home and her peace of mind, but she walked away with a massive cash payout, a $300,000 windfall born from Caryn's greed. It was a stunning reversal of fortune, a form of poetic justice that no one could have scripted. Amy had stood up for herself, refused to be a victim, and in doing so had turned a malicious attack into a life-changing financial gain. She had proven that she was a force to be reckoned with, no longer the woman who would acquiesce to the pressures of her ex-husband or his partner. For Caryn, the loss was total and catastrophic. She lost the money, she was exposed as a forger and a liar. But the most significant loss was the trust of Matt Roloff. How could their relationship ever be the same? Matt now knew she was capable of lying to him on a massive scale, of hiding huge sums of money, of committing felonies behind his back. He was a man obsessed with control, and she had proven herself to be a rogue agent, operating entirely outside of his authority. The foundation of their partnership, built on the idea that she was his loyal and trustworthy second in command, was pulverized. Insiders are now speculating that this event has created a wound in their relationship that may never heal. The arguments, the suspicion, the constant wondering what else she might be hiding. It would be a poison that would slowly erode everything they had built together. And what about the family? The Roloff children, Zach, Jeremy, Molly, and Jacob, would inevitably learn the truth. Any reservations or suspicions they may have harbored about Caryn's motives over the years would be validated in the most dramatic way possible. This act of direct fraud against their mother would be unforgivable. It would draw a line in the sand, solidifying their allegiance to Amy and creating a permanent, unbridgeable chasm between them and Caryn. How could they ever look at her the same way again? How could they ever bring their children, Matt and Caryn's grandchildren, to the farm, knowing that she had attempted to defraud their own grandmother? This act would not just be a betrayal of Amy. It would be seen as a betrayal of the entire family. It would forever taint Caryn's role as the matriarch in waiting, exposing her, in their eyes, as nothing more than a grifter who had targeted their mother. In the end, the secret land deal was a disaster of Caryn's own making. Her greed led her to overplay her hand, to underestimate Amy's strength and resolve. She saw an opportunity for a quick and easy payday, but what she actually did was light a fuse on a bomb that blew up her life, her reputation, and her relationship with the man she claimed to love. The story serves as a stark and powerful lesson that truth has a way of coming out, and that acts of betrayal, especially those committed against family, will eventually lead to a reckoning. Amy Roloff, meanwhile, is left in a position of unprecedented strength. She has her beautiful home, free and clear of any encumbrances. She has her loving husband, Chris, who stood by her side through the entire ordeal, and she has an extra $300,000 in her bank account, a symbol of her victory and a constant reminder of the day she refused to back down. She not only stopped the destruction of her property, she emerged from the battle wealthier, stronger, and completely vindicated. Caryn Chandler may have started the fire, but it was Amy Roloff who walked out of the ashes unscathed and triumphant, leaving Caryn to be consumed by the flames of her own deception, forever humiliated, and left with the impossible task of explaining to Matt and to the world how it all went so terribly wrong. The secret is out, the damage is done, and for the Roloff family, nothing will ever be the same again.